Great. Well, good evening, and those were fantastic films. Before I get started, I'm going to use my point of privilege to say something. It's something I often say, but when I watched the second film about ACT UP last night, I was struck by it again. The number of women that stood up for gay men during that time, and how it has always bothered me that the men in the LGBT community these days don't stick up for women the same way. We owe our lesbian sisters a huge debt of gratitude, and we should never, ever forget that. So. Doesn't it make you want Act Up again? I mean, I watch that and think about the issues that we face now, and they're not about life and death, but a little civil disobedience is a healthy thing, isn't it? What did you think of it when it was happening back in the 80s and 90s?
It was so necessary. And I think that if things don't turn around here, you will find straight people copying and doing it, because so much bad stuff is going on in government and in the lives of people, and especially here in Arizona. Things need to be done.
Patrick, what did you think of ACT UP when it was going on? Did you think it was embarrassing or encouraging?
No, I'd have to say I found it to be very encouraging. I think that when a group of people become that oppressed, there has to be some way for them to be able to come out of that and to have their own voice and be able to overcome that, or at least express the frustration that's involved in that. I didn't find any embarrassment about it either. I didn't come out till 1987, so some of that was still going on during that period of time. I don't know that if I would have, I was in Albuquerque at the time, so I don't know that I would have, whether or not I would have been a part of ACT UP had I been in New York or in Chicago or somewhere else. But I didn't feel any repulsion about it as I understood it then, and as I watched the film again. I just felt like it was a very necessary part of our history to stand up and to say, we are here and we are being mistreated. And then to see, I think what I liked about the documentary so much was to see not only the action that took place, but then the results that happened as a result of that action. And I think that's what really validated whatever methods were used, because it actually accomplished something.
Yeah, you know, more or less the count tally right now is that the LGBT community is denied about 1,200 federal and state rights, give it more or less, because of lack of marriage equality. And do you think that that's an issue strong enough, resonates strong enough to get people motivated the same way they were over a life and death issue? Casey, I see you nodding. You want to chime in?
Yeah, it's an issue. Anytime anybody is denied their constitutional rights, I've often wondered if they take it to the Supreme Court saying, now, you could marry her and you're a man. I can't marry her because I'm a woman. Now, that's sexual discrimination. But, yeah, I think it's an issue. I think it's coming to the forefront. There are many more people who see it our way now than there were before. I am really concerned the direction the country's going, and in Arizona, a red state.
Yeah, Jerry.
Who?
Peter, do you think it's enough to get people back out on the streets again? It hasn't yet, in any big number.
Yeah, I believe that it's time. We need to go back out to the roots of ACT UP. There's still a lot more work to be done. You know, it was not over just because the plague is, we think that it's a cure, which there is not a cure. You know, a lot of people think you take medication and it's okay and we're fine. We're not. You know, there's people still dying, You know, I was part of ACT UP in the early days. And I remember prior to ACT UP, the fear and the prejudice that was happening. You know, people were getting their houses burned down. You know, you would get fired as soon as someone knew. I've been positive since 1982 when it was GRID. You know, so I've seen the whole gamut. You know, to now, yes, people accept you, but yes, you still get side remarks. You still get the looks, and the education is still lacking.
Where were you in 1982?
In New York.
In New York City?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was part of the whole movement when I was found out.
Yeah, I would like Patrick. It's not a coincidence. I happened to be in Albuquerque at the same time, though we didn't know each other. And so it was something going on in the newspapers. It really wasn't until the mid to late 80s when HIV started popping up in New Mexico, and there's information was a little better at that point about what was going on, but in the early 80s, it was terrible.
Well, basically with me, I was right here in the midst of it here in Phoenix. And being in nursing and healthcare and that sort of thing, Arizona's first documented case of HIV was my patient, which was an owner of a bar that we had here. And I had talked with him and had drinks 3 days before, I'd say maybe about 3 weeks before he was admitted. That Monday morning, I went in and got my routine, my patient list, and the patients I had, and I swung open the door, Loretta Young through the door, and went, and there he was in bed. And I was going, what are you doing here? So then I excused myself and went back, went to his chart, and found out that at that time we didn't quite know I'd had friends before. And this was in 83. You see, this is it. We've had patients, we've had friends that passed away, and they didn't know basically what they would call it. In the room, they wore galoshes, earmuffs, and overshoes, and gowns, and masks, and everything else with an HIV patient. But I had sat and talked with this person 3 weeks ahead of time, and I thought, well, if it's airborne or whatever it is, hell, I'll be sick too. And so I wasn't really afraid of him. And besides, someone who's a friend of yours, you go in and you sit down and talk to them. So that's what I did, and confirmed with his labs and things with the doctor and that sort of thing. And after that, over the years, I feel almost like an old turnip. The best part of me is underground because some of my very, very dearest and closest friends are no longer here. And they were all patients, or I was with them at the time, being a caregiver and in the nursing. I've lost not just guys, but 2 of the women that I've had as friends. And so, like I had said, been there, done that, and I've got a T-shirt to prove it, several. So, in the art of what I do is female impersonation, which was 40-some years, and nursing 42 years. You know, been there, and I've done it, and so everybody is very familiar. I've always been in healthcare, even back in the days of Chicago.
I'm going to kind of switch gears and get to I don't know if it's a livelier topic, but let's go back chronologically and talk about the first film. I'm from the generation, like right immediately after Stonewall. I was 12 in 1967, so I came out in the mid-70s. I think we're all up here because we're a bunch of relics. Sorry, but part of what we're going to talk about. No. Everybody's fine with it. They know. Part of what we're going to talk about is what was life like. I mean, it was striking watching the first movie, and I mean, while the 1970s were no picnic, people were no longer, bars weren't getting raided anymore, and people weren't getting arrested like that. But does anyone want to start off with your own experience back in the 60s or 50s, what it was like?
Well, back in the days of Chicago, I was arrested 3 times. That's when they had the Black Mariah, the wagons that they have there, for male being in female attire. So, even to this very day, I may have on pantyhose and 3-inch spikes, but I still got 2 pairs of guys' underwear on. Because in those days, it'd strip you down, believe me. And if you did not have 3 articles or 2 articles of male clothing in your, no matter what kind of dress you had. Of course, mine was a designer that unzipped in the back. But, however, I still had to have those jockey shorts on. And so they put you in jail. They really wouldn't. So I think maybe about 3 times I went. And they keep you overnight and let you out that Sunday morning. And here you are with this dress on from the bar that you had just performed in. You've got to catch a cab if you didn't have any money. Of course, you couldn't have any money when you were being arrested. You got to get out there and wave down a cab or get on a bus or walk. And walking in Chicago in 3-inch heels is
In
hard.
high heels. In the snow, backwards, uphill.
Remember those days? Plus, you'd snatch your wig off, too. And you didn't get it back. But I had hair in those days, and so they just thought I was a lovely lady with short hair and being sexy.
Was that because Mayor Daley was like J. Edgar Hoover and he had a private collection of wigs?
Great, so yeah.
But you know, it wasn't really that bad. We did have lots of fun at the bars.
Oh, yeah.
The thing, though, was in New York City, we would, speak to each other on the phone to make arrangements as to where we would meet and which bars we would go to. And we would say, well, we'll go to such and such, or like the candy store, or whatever.
The Limelight.
Well, that too.
Limelight.
That was later on.
See?
9 Circle.
And if it were closed because it was raided or whatever, we had an alternative place to go to.
You were at Stonewall, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, the usual, my usual route for the evening would be first to go to Julius. And that was like a darkish kind of bar that had the most fabulous hamburgers. And I can still taste them in my mouth right now. Kind of butchy, kind of guys. And we would be standing there in the summer with our Izod shirts, in the winter with our pastel-colored sweaters, showing off, and kind of preppy-ish. The group that I was like near in the back, and then we go to the Stonewall.
Stonewall was.
Oh, you
full of
couldn't
drag
go too
queens.
early,
Yeah.
and you didn't necessarily live in Greenwich Village, so you made the trip.
I was just
No
having
problem.
trouble equating preppy and drag queen in the same bar.
This is what I'd like to clarify with you. The Stonewall was not a drag bar. It just had a few girls coming in
Exactly.
because
That
they
was a local bar.
they wanted free drinks or whatever. They had no money. They were poor. But it was all like mostly guys, and when the styles changed, to the flannel shirts and jeans and boots, that came later on. But before that, it was a very preppy kind of establishment with dancing. And the women that were there were usually very few lesbians, but a lot of fag hags, straight women were there. And if the cops would come in, they would flash lights or whatever, and the boys would stop dancing with the boys, and the women would come and like rescue us, and we would dance with women instead.
Yeah,
And
just
it
grab the
was
first
kind of
woman you
like
saw
fun
around.
in a way.
Exactly.
Casey, where were you in the 60s?
Oh, we're just talking about the women hanging out in the gay bars that weren't lesbians. We used to call them fruit flies. Yeah, Jerry knew Maury in Chicago, and I've known Jerry since she moved to Phoenix, which was 1964. the year after I graduated from high school. So next year, my 50th high school reunion. Yeah, and then they consider me the baby here.
Back, what's the talk of the town?
We had a talk of the town as well.
Oh, but it wasn't anything like Phoenix.
No, it wasn't, honey.
Oh.
You wish it.
What do you mean? What do you mean, I wish?
No,
Yeah.
Jerry, you remember in the film, it showed that there was a woman who spoke about being repeatedly arrested because of her attire in Chicago. In the film, the first film, a woman spoke about being repeatedly arrested in Chicago because of the clothing she was wearing. They thought it was too masculine. Did you ever see that happen in Chicago?
Yeah, in some instances, again, like they had said.
Yeah, he said that he had to have 3 male pieces of laundry on. Well, I had to have 3 of the girl kind, and which I usually did, my socks and unders, you know. But they were just not nice. And
Did you get arrested? Were you arrested in Chicago?
not in Chicago, but when I got here.
They're tougher here.
Is that because they mistook you for being Latino?
Was it because they thought you was Latino?
Oh, yeah, sure thing.
Yeah.
It was pre-Arpaio. Yeah, and you know, back then, I had to leave the house in a skirt and then change to my tough jeans when I was in the car. It wasn't fun. But if you wanted to go out, you had to go how you could. And the police would park. Well, we usually tried to park a long distance from the bars, but they would hang around outside the bars and just come up to us and ask us a few questions, just to scare us, more than anything. Anyway, there was one bar I was in, and somebody I knew from a tall club that I belonged to, he came in and he stood over me, and I told him, "I'm queer, but I'm clean." That was Chicago.
She had the unfortunate happenstance. Her brother was on the police force, and she came out to her family when he was sitting there bragging about all the queers he'd busted and how they'd go to the bars and break antennas and crack windows, etc. And Jerry had just gotten a brand new car, so she looked at him and she said, "Well, if you see my car there, please leave it alone." So that was the coming out party for her.
Well, we know how the Hispanics feel here. It ain't pretty.
No, and that's why, me personally, especially when, it's been going on for a few years, but especially when SB 1070 was passed, I took that really personally. I'm not Latino, but I feel the sting of discrimination, and it's hard not to feel that when someone else is a target as well. But down the road, where were you in the 1960s, Peter?
I was born in '64, so I was still my mama's baby.
So you're actually younger than me. So so when did you come out?
I was 13 when I came out. It was 78. And basically.
When you went back in?
No, when I went back in, no, exactly. Back in '78 in New York City, it was a whole different. Actually, if you listen to the movie Cruising, back then you hear the gay youth back then protesting against the movie. And Dressed to Kill was 2 of the movies that we marched and protested against because it kept on showing us as serial killers, and we wanted to change that aspect. Got arrested there twice, so.
We're serial lovers, not killers.
Now it's serial lovers. And then the epidemic started, so.
Yeah, I actually was in New York during the 70s when I came out
Yeah.
too. But I wasn't that active. It was much more partying, kind of, it wasn't social activism yet. That hadn't quite made it into my consciousness.
I was in San Francisco when gay men and friends were dying and nobody knew why. And then later they came out with GRID, gay-related immunodeficiency or some, but go into the bars and people wouldn't even drink mixed drinks. It had to be like a beer out of a bottle because they were afraid whoever touched the glass or drank from it last would be affected. Me, not much of a beer drinker, I just ordered mine mixed drinks. But then it became a little more knowledgeable. In fact, an acquaintance of mine is a doctor, and he died, and nobody knew what it was at that time. And things were just starting. I know women got involved. I found that when I went to men's groups to get involved, I was the envelope licker or the stamp putter on or the file clerk. And I said, I'll do what I can, but I'm not going to be in an organization that's still going to treat me like second-class citizens. But we all did what we could, all the way up to still doing it. People with AIDS haven't gone away. And we will still continue to do whatever we can to make their lives better. No matter what's happening, I'd like to say whatever's happening in the government does have a great impact on us all. But as a community, we will always rise to any challenge.
I personally want to thank the lesbian community and the queers, the drag queens, because they were the forefront. If it wasn't for them who was out there screaming day after day that we were dying, we would not be here today, And it was the gay nurses that actually went and helped us when we were in the hospital, because they would literally leave your tray outside the door. They would not in what we call the Darth Vader suit, and 10 feet away from you, and they're asking you a question. It's like, hello, I can't even hear you. I can't even get up. I'm so weak, and yet you want me to get my own food? And it was a fight. It was a struggle, and there was a lot of fears, a lot of fear.
I think they gave more credence when, in New York City, the lesbian community really fought hard. And they, because so many of gay men were caring for the sick, as I was doing as well, and the women would stand up and they would, I think, they listened to them more than they would the gay men, because it was more like a motherly thing.
Or a big sister.
Yeah.
Or terrifying.
Yeah, they could beat the crap out of them.
Well, I think they were more viewed as the caregivers. So that's why they were more paying attention to them quicker than they would us gay men who were actually taking care of our own spouses. But we didn't count.
One of the common themes I just heard from just about everyone was talking about bar experiences. Things have changed a lot. There are more outlets, but back then, were there other places other than bars that you could engage in social activities?
Sure, the Metropolitan Opera. Are you kidding?
And in New York, the trucks.
Yeah.
And in
You
New
kidding?
York, the trucks.
Well, we won't talk about that.
Central Park.
Especially when there were
Central Park, yeah.
Wagnerian operas, the guys would be all in leather. Are you kidding? That was unbelievable. What an active community.
Those are crickets, those are zippers.
Yeah. What?
They used to say about Central Park and in Canto, Those aren't crickets, those are zippers?
Zippers. Oh, God, that's right.
We don't
was
talk
Central
about the
Park.
Rambles. and
I
places
said
like
social
that.
activities.
And Central Park West. And the wedding cake, what is it, 87th Street?
87th Street?
Yeah, Central Park West.
Yeah, oh, the Rambles.
No, the Rambles were not there. That was another spot.
Uncle Charlie's.
Whole bunch of them. Charlie's North,
Charlie's downtown.
downtown, the one on Greenwich Avenue, and the one on 30-something Street.
Uncle Charlie was
Forsooth,
everywhere.
my dear, you
Oh,
did.
Charlie was all over the place. There were Charlie's Restaurant.
Then the Anvil and Alex in Wonderland was the other bar that most people frequently.
And what about the Barefoot Boy?
Barefoot Boy. And the
Are you
Rambles.
kidding? I was never
mean,
there longer than a
Rambles.
half hour.
Oh, Barefoot Boys? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other places that most gay men was the bathhouses. You know, we had St. Mark's, you had
The Continental.
Broadway
Do
Arms,
you remember when the was it the Beacon?
the Beacon.
No, they had the explosion, the gas explosion. You know how many phone calls I got? Are you okay?
Were you there?
You know what? It's a really good.
No, the
topic.
Everards.
The Everhard.
It's a really good topic because one of the things that gets lost when we're looking back over history is what the LGBT community was like immediately before AIDS. And most people never get to hear a lot about the good times, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah. You want to start?
Of course.
Well, there was a big campiness back then. You know, everything was fun and game, and like that's when the Marlboro Man was basically around, and everybody dressed the same, and and everything was a party. You know, from one to the next one before AIDS, and then the doom came, and you could feel a pin drop down Christopher Street because every other week you heard someone else passed away.
Especially the guys that were frequenting the mine shaft.
And the mine shaft.
Yeah, that, you see, that was, and I think I'm the oldest up here. And I came out in Boston when we your Afro-Americans were still struggling we still had segregation. And but I came out in Boston right after I got out of service. And
What year?
what?
What year? If you want to share that.
56. Well, never mind. We won't talk about years. But moving right along, let's just say I was out.
And Eisenhower was
Yeah, I
president.
was going to Fire Island and Providencetown, and they asked me where I worked. Of course, the gentleman that I was with says, Maury isn't working, he's guesting. And I said, that's sure, and I'll have a dirty martini, 3 olives, very dirty. And, you know, that was it. I was going to Fire Island back in 55 and 56. And, we didn't go there then.
When you were 3?
Honey, no, I was old then. Just been around a long time.
A precocious 3-year-old.
Just hateful, just hateful. Yeah, that's the thing. And drag was queen, and, well, I didn't do drag then, but, and I had just gotten out of service, out of the Army, and life was just beautiful, especially at that age, because I had friends that took you everywhere, and the nicer things, Boston Opera, polo matches, sailboat races, all that. Oh, baby, you didn't know me then. I was uptight and out of sight. Yeah. Isn't that right, honey? She'll tell you.
Patrick, I think I heard you say you came out in '87. Is that what you said? Yeah.
Right. So I'm just enjoying listening to all this that happened before I came out.
It's interesting for, coming out, well, later is that we didn't have the threat of police arresting us, but we had AIDS sitting up there like that. How did you deal with that coming out after AIDS was around? How did that change things for you?
I became HIV positive in '87. I came out and I became positive in that same year. So the ignorance and the fright were still extremely valid and palpable. You know, when I came to the doctor's office to get the diagnosis, they said, you've got 6 months to live. Get your affairs in order. So we were still there. And Pete and I were just talking about the fact that both of us made the decision. He took AZT for a little bit, and I made the decision not to take it, which was exactly what they were pushing on me at the time. And then I began to see all of those who were dying, who were on AZT, which became just a huge, scary situation. And then it wasn't long after that that I began to go into the Metropolitan Community Church there in Albuquerque, and got involved there just as a member, helping out any way I could, because I'd been a pastor before. And then came here in '92 as the pastor of General Shepherd Metropolitan Community Church. So I got to go through a lot of the fear and pastoral care of others who were sick in the hospital, dying, holding their hands, while I knew this thing was going to also happen to me. So it was quite, that was one of these things. My calling was saying help. I don't know, Maury, if you experienced this or not. My calling was saying help. At the same time, everyone you helped, you saw yourself.
Well, you kept on seeing yourself in the mirror. I've lost many friends, and my partner died in my arms at home. And yeah, and even today, when someone gets sick, it all comes back up. Exactly. All those feelings of not knowing, of the insecurity of, is that going to be me? Right. And how long would it be me? Yeah.
And more, even in '87 through '92, '94, we were still the only ones who would hold their hand,
Right.
who would kiss them, who would say, you're loved, you're okay, God loves you. We still find a little of that in 2012. We still see a little bit of that occasionally, especially when the family comes into the hospital room or to the hospice and their son has AIDS. We still see the reticence to hug, to hold, to touch, to kiss. And it's sad that in 2012 we're still there with a lot of people.
Well, like when we were saying AZT, I was, first of all, when we've got the medical foundation approval for AZT, that was the med of all meds saved. Only thing about it, I had found that as I would confer with the doctors, the leading doctors in HIV study here, we would talk about T-cell count. And like I said, in nursing, being male, as nursing is a female noun, it's like being a lady mechanic. You better know your stuff when you go in. And basically, I priced myself at that, at being a very good nurse, the best I could be at that time. And I would confer back and forth with the doctors about AZT. It's not until a cocktail came in where we could mix these meds and they would be viable for that patient's DNA. And I used to sit there, like I said, when I was good, I was doggone good, or tried to be doggone good. And that was one of the things, like you guys said, that you took it only for a short time, or you decided not to take it at all.
Well, back then, the AZT, you was taking 2 pills 8 times a day.
Right.
You know, so, I mean, and basically it's chemotherapy.
There
so
you
you're
go,
not only
which
killing
would
the
be
good cells, you're
toxic to
killing
the
the bad
system.
cells, you know, and you're weakening your immune system even more.
There you go.
So that's why I, at the beginning, decided I'd rather treat the opportunistic diseases, not HIV itself.
There you go. That's one of the main things. And like I had said, I lost so many dear, dear friends. No lovers or anything like that, because I've just stopped. And every time I lost a friend, it was 4 to 5 to 6 Tanqueray martinis up with an olive. And I thought, Maury, you got a problem here, honey. You're gonna. But like I had said, with ACT UP and all of that, and the friends and people like my sweetheart down here, and my good minister, and friends, I have survived and been the person that I am today.
So, Jerry and Casey, how did HIV affect you? Did you know lots of people who became HIV positive or died of AIDS?
I lost quite a few of them, if you're talking about here in Phoenix, yeah. Yeah, it just seemed like 2 or 3 times a week we were going to a memorial somewhere. And one of them asked me his name. He was a priest, you know, and he came out of the priesthood. And of course they all asked him to, how do you call it, take care of the ceremonies, you know. And after a while, he started to get sick. And not because he was doing what he was doing, but he just said he couldn't do it anymore because it's just too much after a while. But it was either at somebody's house or at a mortuary. It was 2 or 3 times a week for a long, long time. And just everybody I knew, all the guys I knew, my funny friends. Yeah, him too. Okay.
So a little bit of a kind of a bleaker question, but I assume everyone has had lots of people that they knew die. How has that experience affected you today, the fact that so many people in your life have died?
Well, I had 2 partners. That's all I had, in my lifetime, and they both died of AIDS. And it's devastating knowing that happens, so that you don't want to be in that kind of relationship after that happens.
So
You want to have good friends, close friends, but not a partner.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it affected me emotionally.
Well, basically with me, I think being the HIV nurse, one of my very, very best friends, who was the cosmetologist and makeup artist for the Playboy Enterprises, that did all the centerfolds, the Bunny of the Month and all that, was my makeup artist and beautician. And, oh God, we had been friends for 30 years before he passed away. So when he told me that he was HIV, I said, well, why don't you come to Phoenix? I was living here in Arizona, and he came to live with me here. And along with the meds and that sort of thing as we talk about, I take him to church. Every Sunday, I think you would probably remember, a little blonde kid, looks something like you. A little funny hair, and so just
Funny.
Oh, okay, I get the funny part, but where do you get blonde? It's gray.
well, no, he was. No, he was then. He was then. Who passed away after 30 years of just very, very good friend. And he was telling me, he said, we're all here put for, I had a patient that, read me. I walked in one day, well, first of all, being confused, the whole thing, and he asked me, why wasn't I sick? Because I was just an old black drag queen. But he used the big N word. And I was there, I was bending over backwards, being very, and just feeling for him every day. And I was tremendously hurt. And so I mentioned it to Jimmy when I came home that evening, and he told me, I said, well, what would you tell somebody like that you really care about? I know that he's angry, he's confused, he's in pain. And so he said, I've come to this conclusion that our entire lives is like in a big book. And as life turns and the years turn, we turn the page. And everybody has this book, has a book of their own. And when it's that chapter, that's the end of their chapter. But it's all the people who's touched their lives, it's been in their lives. and explain it to him. So when I went back to work the next day, of course, I got him again as my patient. And I explained that to him, and he asked me, he said, the music that you do in the shows and things, Maury, could I have a CD, tape of it? That's when we had tapes. And I brought that to him, and I said, all right then, you have lunch. And I says, I'm gonna go and do charting and check my labs, and I'll be back. And the song that was playing, it was an old Gladys Knight thing that I used to do all the time. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. And that was playing, and he had his hand on the seat, on the player, and he was gone. So that keeps coming back with people who have touched my life, who are no longer here. That's why with people like my girlfriend down here, and my minister, you to always say, thank you, I'm glad to see you, and thank you for touching my life. As we get older, we don't get a chance to tell people that, how important. They don't have to be a significant other, they can just be a friend. To say thank you for being there. I enjoyed seeing you. So those are the things that I've learned to share from the people that I can't share them with any longer.
Great. Casey, how has the amount of death from HIV affected you? How did it affect you?
Well, I was pretty much a lesbian separatist, so I didn't have an awful lot of, yeah, well, I was a lesbian back when I was still gay. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, I'm not gay, I'm a lesbian. Anyway, it used to be the gay community, not lesbians, gays, and anyway, that doesn't have much to do with it. I lost friends that I had in Chicago and some of their friends when I was in the Bay Area. It wasn't until I came back to Phoenix that, you know, all hell broke loose. And we did what we could for it. And it was sad. It was just sad seeing all the empty spaces in everybody's life. You know someone and you know there are at least 6 empty spots in their hearts for people that have passed. And
you know, I think on some level it forced me to maybe mature faster, because when someone dies, we all go through a grief cycle, and you'll often see someone who has not had a lot of death in their life get stuck in the grief cycle, but with that amount of grief that I had to process, and we all had to process, what it did for me is it actually perversely made me a lot stronger. Like when my parents died, it was really hard, but I was able to move past it a lot more quickly than anyone else I know, because I've had so much death in my life at an early age. And so that actually it's been, in its own way, a good thing for me. It's made me a lot stronger as I've gotten older. How did HIV affect, all the death affect you, Jerry?
I can't hardly understand what you're saying.
Well, my question was, did you have a lot of people that you know die, especially in the 1980s, of HIV?
Oh, many, many.
And how did that affect you personally?
Well, it just made me want to do things. I mean, and, you know, because some of them were so afraid, especially when they first would enter the hospital and they would do that, donning all those clothes, you know, and making them feel worse than they feel already. And then they would, you know, tell me about it. And I'd like to go beat up all the nurses, but they wouldn't let me. But it's just like I said, because I was a noisy one out there, you know, so I knew a lot of people, a lot of the guys. And pretty soon I didn't know that many.
Yeah. Peter?
Me, it affected me in many different ways. By the age of 27, I have lost over 100 friends, 100 people. Actually, watching these movies brings back, for me, is watching ghosts, because I see a lot of friends that they're no longer here. So it was hard for me to actually sit through. And how it affected me even more is my own mentality. I go through survivor's guilt. I don't understand why 30 years later I'm still here and they're gone, you know, and I live with that every day. You know, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think of one of them that's gone, you know. Yes, it made me stronger, and you deal with death a little easier. You hear it, it's like, and it kind of jaded you, which it took away the naivety of death. You know, it becomes your friend. It becomes someone that you actually embrace, as odd as it may sound.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Patrick.
One of the points I'd like to make is that as old as we are here, there's some of us, we've stood on the shoulders of the gay people that came before us. It's been a very long, slow process, and we're still processing. So one of the things that I ask is stay involved and hold on to your anger. You know, don't let it rule you, but hang on to it, because there's a lot of things to be angry about. The way our men were treated, the way women are being treated now, and some of the rights that they're talking about taking away. But, yeah, you just, I know it sounds a little silly, but stay angry, keep your edge, because sometimes things get worse before they get better, and we're still in the process of becoming first-class citizens, which I believe we are anyway, but we have to make sure everybody else knows that.
We're going to have to wrap it up so that we can do questions, so I'm just going to finish with Patrick real fast.
You know, I think that the thing that being a pastor, being a nurse, you can become rather clinical on all of this, because you try to keep removing yourself so you can do your professional duty. But in the end, I think the thing that I've learned through it personally, and that I try to lead other people as they are still becoming HIV positive, and that's a loss, that's a grief of their health, or the possibility of death, is that today counts. You got to get in, and you got to make today count. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow. So I think that is how it's impacted me, to make my life count, but also to make those around me, to say the same thing. Yeah, you've got troubles, you may be getting sick, your counts may be down, you may have just found out you're positive, whatever it is, but you're still alive. And all of these who've gone before us are counting on us to keep pushing it forward. And so it's today, it's about today.
Yeah, Casey, I like that you brought it back to standing on the shoulders of giants, and I really liked when I was watching the film about ACT UP how they chose to document our own history instead of leaving it to other people, because the LGBT history is not well documented. A lot of it is obscured, and so I always feel compelled to pass along a curious fact that people may or may not have overlooked. Remember President Buchanan, the one who preceded Abraham Lincoln? He had a lifelong relationship with Senator Rufus King from Alabama, and when Buchanan was elected president, Rufus King moved into the White House and lived with him, and the press called him Senator Fancy Pants. So we actually have had a gay president in this country, but they don't want to let us know about that or talk about it. So our history is really important, and we need to talk about it, and that's why these films are so important. So we're going to open it up for questions.
Okay. No, everybody needs a microphone because we're recording this. We want to be able to hear it on the recording.
Okay. I've been doing a lot of research, and I think that I didn't choose this, it chose me. I think it's a disability, and I don't understand why other people don't think it's a disability.
when you say it, do you mean HIV or being a gay? Being gay is a disability. Does anyone agree with that? I happen to think that I won the lottery, but that's my own opinion.
I never found it as a disability. I found it empowering. I came out at 13. I came out to my family. And I come from a born-again Christian background. Oh, and I come from a born-again Christian background. But I fought tooth and nail. No, this is who I am. I still, to this day, argue with my mother about me being gay or her acknowledging my partner, you know, and no.
Excuse me, I don't think you understand me.
Okay.
I'm not mad that I'm gay. I came out in May. I would not want to be cured, but I did try 50 years to be straight. Now you're forcing me to extend my thing, and I'm trying to be quick. Mm-hmm. I'm saying technically, medically, doctors, researchers refuse to say it's a disability. I would like to know what's behind that.
I used to think it was a disease.
Back in 1977, it was taken off the books as a mental illness. To 77, it was considered, if you were gay or lesbian, you were mentally ill, and your parents could actually take you to a local institution and put you away. And that's where a lot of the old thinking comes from. You know, but it's not a disability.
Yeah, I'd have to ask a question back, is why would something which is perfectly normal be a disease or a disability? It's normal. It's as normal as being left-handed, and left-handedness used to be considered an illness too. In fact, they would punish you for it.
There's always lobotomies.
Yeah.
They tried that too.
May I say something, Princess?
Go. The only medically trained person up here.
You know what? Consider yourself special. First of all, you're attractive, you enunciate beautifully, you're intelligent. Never take being gay as a hindrance. Take it as, you know what?
No, she's not feeling it. She feels,
I know you're not feeling it.
Do.
Not now, because like I said, you're beautiful. You've got a heck of a lot to offer. Don't be mad at it, because it... But you know what? First of all, look at me. I'm a guy, an old man, 75 years old,
now
and
we finally
a female impersonator for many, many years. And you know what? Once you take it and accept who you are, what you are, your goals, your setbacks, and try to overcome them, you're happy, and the whole thing, and with a deeper understanding.
I think what she was saying is that she doesn't feel that way, but do others, like the physicians or whatever, behind closed doors still think that it's a disability, right? Or am I wrong?
I think it is a disability. I tried to be straight for 50 years.
I don't want to invalidate anyone's opinions, but does anyone up here think that being gay or lesbian is a disability?
No.
Yeah. And that's why the medical profession uniformly says it's normal now, and has for 30 years.
The part of me that I feel is a disability is the fact that I have asthma, but not that I'm gay.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents accepted me, noted me as being gay when I was young.
When you can still lose your job
Well,
for being gay.
there may be discrimination, but being gay is not inherently, in and of
stupid
itself,
people.
a disability.
Stupid people rule the world.
That's right.
Yeah.
We got to get out of their way.
No, I never felt that it's a disability in any which way. And I think she means society as whole view us as a disability. But it's not a disability if, you know, you try to go and do what society told you. You need to get married, you have to do the thing, and you realize that was not the way you wanted to be.
I have never wanted sex with a man.
But, so, exactly.
Let's move on to another one. Bill.
Can I make a comment, please?
Yeah, go on.
Maybe being straight was a disability for this young lady, or thinking that she was.
I was trying to be straight.
Do we have any other questions?
pressure.
Yeah. Oh, but there's some questions back that way.
I came out to Brokeback Mountain when I was 61 years old, and I looked around as a Mormon and I said, who's in charge of this gay thing? And it turns out nobody was. There was 2 or 3 lesbians pissing on each other from HRC in Equality, Arizona. And so my friend and I resurrected the Arizona Stonewall Democrats. We put together the LGBT coalition, which was between HRC and Arizona, Equality Arizona, and Stonewall's in the Republican group. But what I didn't know until I saw the movie this afternoon was the reason we have not been successful here. One of the things is that we don't have a common fight. The second thing is, what made ACT UP so successful was what they portrayed in the movie, in the documentary, is that there were many groups like HERO, Human and Equal Rights Organizers, Stonewall Democrats. Everybody came together to fight one thing. And so I'm glad that you were able to put this on for me in particular, because now I understand we are never going to do anything exciting in Arizona until we have one thing to fight. And that's when we'll all come together, and all that brilliant energy that comes with youth and all those different organizations will come together again. It may come down to marriage at some time in the future if the Supreme Court or somebody says we cannot have gay marriage. But so now I can go away from this thankful that you taught me something and that I understand why ACT UP was so successful. And I wish, not that I would have been there because of the AIDS epidemic, but I could have been there to put my energy in with everybody else. So thanks very much.
You're right about the fact that ACT UP was successful because we had so many different fractions of gay life that came together. It was not just ACT UP. You know, there was Queer Nation, there was People with AIDS Coalition, there was there's all different organizations, Brooklyn AIDS Task Force, the Hispanic AIDS Forum. There was so many different that came together, and we all took different fractions. You do this, you take that, and we all came together and fought and actually got some things done. You know, when we start dividing is when we wound up not getting what we needed. It was a big umbrella, exactly. It was one big umbrella.
Yeah, if you follow up with a comment, can you talk into the mic to make sure it gets recorded?
Okay.
Yeah.
It was not a question, no. Excuse me, a statement. First, I want to say I give thanks to you all for being, you know, up there and representing. Number 2, as far as gay, that means happy. So if it's gay being wrong, I'd rather be wrong. And I'm same-sex partner. Ever since I was 5, I was in love with my 5th grade teacher. Not 5, 5th grade. I was in love with my 5th grade teacher. My family, they dressed me just like I'm dressed now. You know, I don't know any different. But to me, the spirit has no gender. So being same-sex or straight, it's just an experience. And we come here to experience love, and love has no color, it has no form, it's just love. And they don't want us to love. It ain't about being same-sex or gay or whatever, because it wouldn't, J. Edgar Hoover wouldn't have been doing what he was doing and all the rest of them. They just didn't want us to love.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
I have a question. Do you think that the marriage acceptance for gay marriage is enough to bring the community together? I'm asking the panel.
I'm not so sure that I think it is. I think we're still very broken about how we feel about it as a community. I think there are advocates that we need it. It would cause us to be equal. And I think we have just as many people on the opposite side and a lot in the middle. I think we have as many on the opposite side that said we don't need it to be valid. We don't need it to be couples and lovers because we proved we can do that without state sanction. So I'm not so sure that it will, because like Brendan said, it's not a life and death issue. It's a rights issue, yes. But I don't think we all stand that society needs to quit killing us by not taking care of us. So I'm not so sure.
You're right, it's a rights issue, and moreover, in the LGBT community, just like in the heterosexual community, there are a whole lot of people who really don't want to get married either.
Well, that's the whole thing. We get divided because you have people that feels that by conforming, getting married, we're trying to be straight, and that's not what we're trying to do. We just want the benefits that goes with it. You know.
I think we're out of time. I'm getting the signal from back over there to wrap it up. So I want to thank everyone for being here, and thank everyone out there for being here.
And thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you all. Thank you very, very much.